everybody. We're doing the topic is going to be privacy screens. My name is Paul Auer. I've been working here for about 2.5, 3 years now. A lot of people want a privacy screen for one reason or another. Maybe their neighbors, a little bit higher up and looking right down on them, and so they want a little bit of privacy. So I've got several plants right here that make great privacy screens, and most of them are evergreen, and a couple of them are deciduous. Or I should say most of them are conifers. And there's a couple of vines that if you really want to screen really fast, and you don't want to wait around too long, you can use a vine. Like the Hall's honeysuckle is a really good choice right here, because it is one of the only, it's practically the only vine that's not going to be deciduous and lose its leaves and look kind of like sticks during the wintertime, right? It'll actually stay nice and green, and plus it's very, very drought tolerant. So you see it all over town. It's the #1 honeysuckle that you see because the landscapers love it. And I think the main reason is because it's very drought tolerant and it's lower liability for them. So that's this one, the typical honeysuckle that you've probably seen for years. It's got the white and yellow flowers. It actually smells probably better than most of the scent on it is really nice. It's better than the rest of the honeysuckles I've noticed too. It gets kind of a purplish tinge during the winter months, if you've noticed that. Certain plants will do that. They'll get this kind of, that are evergreen, they'll get a purple cast, like cotoneaster does that. So anyway, that's a vine. And here's another vine right here called Akebia. I never heard of this one until I started working here. Somebody came in and they said, wow, this plant is extremely fast growing. So let's say you wanted a screen and you didn't want to wait too many years to get some size out of these other plants. You could get some type of maybe if you have a chain link fence and you could put something sturdy next to it, like some of our arbors. We have some that are 8 feet tall and 4 feet wide. Or if you can make some kind of construction and you got it nice and high, you could probably get a screen really fast that way. Okay, within probably a couple of years. And then, if you wanted to go wide with it, maybe, get a couple of these things, and then you'd have a nice big screen. So there's a couple ideas. This Akebia goes super fast. It's not really known for its flower, its fruit so much. It's mainly just because it's fast. Its foliage is just puts out a lot of foliage. Interesting little shape of the leaves too. It's kind of they go around in a circle.
Evergreen?
Yeah, now this one is kind of semi-evergreen. These are the only two. The Hall's honeysuckle is definitely evergreen. This one, if it gets really cold, it'll probably drop its leaves. But like probably around maybe 15 degrees or somewhere in that range, 10, 15. Because we do get down to single digits normally. We haven't the last couple of years. But so anyway, these are the two that are the best vines for being evergreen. And then the rest of all the vines, just consider those deciduous. Okay. Okay, so now then most people have seen this plant, the Photinia, right? This makes a great screen because it grows fairly rapidly. It does really well around here. It's just amazing how much of this you see around here. You see them as hedges, but you also see them as big plants, especially in Prescott Valley. I've seen some huge ones. I mean, these are listed about 8 to 12 feet high, but I can swear some of them are even taller than that. So they're really old, and they get, after they get 20 years or so, they'll be nice and woody like this. They make a spectacular screen. And this year was really interesting because did you notice they had a lot of white flowers on them? And in years past, I didn't see a whole lot of flowers. So it's a pretty attractive plant, especially with all this red foliage. Go ahead.
How wide does it get, and is it drought tolerant also?
And how wide does it get, and is it drought tolerant? Well, let's see. It can get pretty wide, I'd say about 8 feet wide after it's pretty mature. Since it's used as a hedge plant, you'd see it probably spaced about around 6 feet or something apart if you were to make a hedge out of it. And then is it drought tolerant? I'd say no. Okay, most plants are kind of middle of the road, moderate water users. So this one, I would say definitely it's not a drought tolerant plant. Now, if you want to talk about some really good screens that are drought tolerant, this one here is the Arizona cypress. You can't get much more drought tolerant than this one because this is a native, okay? It's a really tough plant. I've got some of these at my house. I hardly ever put a hose to them. And they're really, really nice plants because they'll get around 20, 25 feet when they're mature, and a tree takes around 20 years or so, let's say. And they've already got some years behind them, by the time you see them at this stage. So in any case, this will get 20, 25 feet and maybe around 10, 12 feet wide, okay? And when they get really old, when they get to maybe, I'm not sure how many years, probably 7 to 10 years, maybe a little bit more, the bark, it'll start to exfoliate, the main trunk, it'll exfoliate, and it has a beautiful red color, not quite as dark as a cherry wood, but really nice looking. So that, and then it has these round cones about so big. So you'll see, if you see a tree around town that's has this kind of bluish color, they're not always quite this blue, but it's around, let's say it's around 15 feet tall and it's fairly 10 feet wide, chances are it's one of these guys. You'll see big screens of these, okay? Another one that's really common as a screen plant is this Leyland cypress, this one right here. This one also gets about the same dimensions as the Arizona cypress, about around 20, 25 feet tall. Now this one, its main reputation is it grows really fast, okay? That's why people tend to go for this one. And you can kind of notice this one has, so now here, speaking of fast, there's the other fastest conifer, I would say would be the Deodar cedar. Let me get that one. Now this one, I imagine a lot of you have seen this. This one's easy to identify because it has this drooping habit. If you ever see a tree that's, once they get old, once they get mature, they're going to be very symmetrical, like a pyramid, and they can get actually very tall. They can get up there, 40 feet. It's going to take quite a while to get there, of course. But if you ever see a tree that has this kind of grayish blue color, just look for the top, the whole thing's just going to be very graceful and kind of hang down like this. That's how you can, it's really easy to spot if you just look for that drooping habit. Now this is a great plant because it's drought tolerant, it's really well suited to our arid climate and our alkaline soil, okay? This is a great choice right here if you want a large screen. Excellent choice. I'd say two really excellent choices would be the Arizona cypress right here and this one right here, because they're both drought tolerant. And the drought tolerant plants just flat out, they just perform better than a lot of the other plants. When it gets, if you get a little bit behind in the watering, they're just more forgiving. They're not so fussy. There's a lot of plants that are very fussy and you get a little bit behind in your watering and we've had all this drought. If you're really not on top of your game, they get stressed out. Well, these things kind of weather the storm, so to speak, when it comes to because they're just so drought tolerant, and they don't have a lot of problems either. They're relatively disease free. Okay, so these I would put this here at the top of your list: the Deodar cedar, and the Arizona cypress. Okay. All right. I've actually seen one of these over by Charlotte Hall. That was really old. I'm not sure how old it was, and it was probably around 40 feet. But normally, you're not going to. I think there's one on the square on the, that is very, very tall as well. But we're talking about really old ones. Okay. Now here's another one that a lot of you might be familiar with. Is the pyracantha. They call it Firethorn. Okay. It's super fast. If you want a fast grower, it's very fast. I used to have about 4 of these, and I was cutting them all the time because they would put on all this top growth. I'd swear it'd be about 2 feet a year. And if I didn't cut it every year, pretty soon I'd had this thing was just sticking up like crazy. And these get about 8 to 10 feet, pyracantha. They usually have either red berries or orange berries. And you'll see them in the fall, and they're really actually spectacular when the berries are going. Oh, and it's interesting, the birds love them, okay? In my neighborhood, yeah, exactly. In my neighborhood, the birds, once these things get, some maturity to them, we're talking 10 years or something like that, and they're getting big and wide. Let's say they get about 6, 8 feet wide, something like that. or maybe a little less, 6 feet, let's say. You'll see birds, they're just flocking in there all the time. And then here, and you mentioned, the berries actually ferment. If they're, if they hang out long enough, they'll ferment. The birds will actually eat the berries and get intoxicated. And they can be hanging upside. Well, I've read about that. I don't know if I've seen them hanging upside down.
Hit sliding windows. Hit windows.
Have you seen that? Hit sliding
in
windows.
In the Bay Area.
Oh, in the Bay Area?
Yeah.
Yeah, I used to live up there myself. So this is, if you want a fast grower, they're about as fast as they get. And it's an impenetrable screen, by the way. If you wanted to keep things out, that's a great choice because they have these spines. Anybody who's ever cut them knows about it. They're really, they're pretty stiff, these spines. So you have to be careful when you're cutting them back, but as long as you, pardon me?
Should they be supported sideways to get them to grow out sideways, like a espalier or fencing type?
Yeah, I've seen them as espalier before. You can kind of train them to grow that way. They don't really need much support when you first plant them. They're so strong. I wouldn't even. I mean, you can see this has got a little support right now. You might support it initially, but they're going to be so stiff that they're tough. And you can cut them way back. People cut them way back to control the height, and of course that'll make them a lot bushier, right? So we have a couple. You've probably seen. I've seen some of these get way taller than what they list them at. There's one over here, over by the fire station, around the corner, Williamson Valley and Iron Springs, and they had these incredibly long branches, several of them, maybe like 10 different branches arching and just completely loaded with these orange berries. Pretty spectacular plant. And it's very well suited to our, it's really tough. If you want something that's not going to die on you, we all do, of course, but that one's not apt to struggle, okay? And
is it drought hardy also?
yes, very drought tolerant, okay? So it's got a lot of advantages. So I'm racing right through these things, huh? If you got any questions, just go ahead. Now, there's a couple other screens that are really that lush green. So far we've been looking at some things that kind of have that blue-gray kind of tone to them, like the Deodar cedar and the Arizona cypress. Now, if you like the really lush green look, let me grab a couple of these here. This one and this one, okay? Okay. Both of these are about the same. There's actually quite a few plants that we have right behind me over here that get not real wide, maybe 3 to 5 feet wide, and they're listed around 15 feet tall. They're probably closer to 12. If something says it's a certain height or width, you're smart to take off maybe 25%, because a lot of times things are somewhat stunted because of our poor soil, and our water is very alkaline. And the soil's very alkaline, real rocky. So a lot of times you're not going to get the heights that you're going to read on these tags. So definitely don't take it literally. So these are listed at 15. Both this is a Spartan juniper right here, and I'm guessing it's probably closer to 12 feet. Okay. There's also another one that's this is called this one right here is called Emerald Green Arborvitae. That's also listed at 15. Okay. So they're both right around 3, 4, 5 feet wide. So I'd say 3 to 4 feet is probably more accurate, okay, for the width. What I like about this Spartan juniper is it gets these beautiful little blue berries, okay? They're really attractive. And it makes a great contrast with this very nice dark green. And it's a pretty clean plant. It just, if you have that, I saw some of these mixed with the flowering plums that have that beautiful plum color next to them. So you can get you can intersperse other plants, and the contrast is really stunning. Okay. Of course, because of the fact that they don't get so wide, like some things, like the Deodar cedar gets real wide, and some of these other trees are going to get some width, or the pyracantha gets some width. Since these aren't very wide, Of course, you'd have to get more of them if you really wanted a nice long screen. So it's probably more suited to these smaller screens, you know, where you're not going a long distance. If you had an area where you wanted to put a lot of trees, just a huge screen right next to a road or something, you know, something that gets some real width, like the Arizona cypress or the Leyland cypress are probably better choices. So this one right here is called the emerald green Arborvitae, or Arborvitae, however you want to pronounce it. This also, you can kind of recognize the Arborvitae because it also has these flat sprays. The way the needles are arranged, they're really flat. And they have these little bitty brown cones. They're kind of attractive when they get the cones. This is a nice one. Right behind me, you see these large, these are the emerald green Arborvitae. And I really like them because they just have that beautiful green color to them, you know.
Are they fast growers?
I would call them more moderate growers, okay? Now this one, I believe, this one right here, the Spartan, I believe they call that one a fast grower.
Yeah, they do.
Yeah, this one says fast on it. Yeah, this Spartan's a good fast grower. This one, I would say, was more moderate, okay? Let me look at this one. Yeah. So,
Question?
go ahead.
How wide and tall, and is it drought tolerant on the arborvitae?
No, it's not drought tolerant, and it's about, it's listed around 15 feet tall, so I'm guessing it's probably closer to 12. Sometimes you'll see them 10 to 12 feet, somewhere in that range. There's some in my neighborhood that are real similar to this one, but they're actually wider, and they're really obviously very, very old, and I'd say they're around 10 to 12 feet. So that's why you really got to take these numbers and tone them down, way down. But if you want, so it's not drought tolerant. If you want a drought tolerant, if drought tolerant is really important to you, and I think that's a good way to go around here because they're just really, the drought tolerant plants just do well. That's why if you look at professional landscapings like Prescott Lake Parkway or retail stores, banks, places like that, that you obviously know that some landscape architect designed it, and they paid, you know, a professional landscaping company to lay it all out and plant everything. I researched a lot of the plants. I would say about 90% of them are drought tolerant. You know, so it's a good bet that if you see something like in a place like that, it's going to be a drought tolerant plant. And the reason they do that, I was talking to a landscaper. Well, it's less liability for them. They don't want to have to be replacing plants, but they want plants that are just really tough. And that are just going to not be so fussy and struggle. They don't want plants that are going to struggle. I want plants that are just going to do well and just keep on growing, and no matter what. And of course, they're going to want more disease-resistant plants as well. So that's kind of a good guide. You see plants around town, and if you like something, you don't know what it is, just break off. You know, and I'm sure you can figure out a way to break off a little twig or something and bring it in, and chances are we're going to know what it is. Or you can just come in, you'll probably see it here. Because most of the plants that you see around town, we're going to have them. Any questions about anything? Now, a lot of these plants, you know, they look great. They don't have to be used for a screen per se. You know, a lot of times you just want a nice looking plant because you want some kind of an accent plant. Like, for example, this plant right here. Let's say you only wanted one or maybe two or three. You could really spread them out. So it's going to make just a screen in a certain area. It's not going to be, you're not really using it as a screen. You just want it for color contrast. And you want it for fairly low maintenance without a whole lot of problems. So you know, something like the Spartan juniper would be a really nice choice. And something like this would be great on the corner of your house because of the fact it doesn't get very wide. If it's listed at 3 to 4 feet, it's probably going to be more like 2 to 3 feet. I've seen some that looked like they were about 8 to 10 feet tall, and they were about so wide. I'd say about 3 feet wide. So that makes a perfect choice for like right on the corner of your house. Okay. So anyway, if you want to talk about planting, what we recommend is that you go, whenever you plant a plant, try to just go the depth of the root ball, but go wide, okay? I planted a lot of roses, and I was always, informed that you wanted really good drainage. So I was going, when I first moved here, I was going like an extra foot, and I practically killed myself with all the rocks, pulling out all kinds of rocks. And then later on I learned, that's really not the best approach. You don't really need to do that. And the reason why you don't want to go too deep is because it tends to want to settle. And when it settles, then all of a sudden the main stem here is going to be, getting too much water, and that can harm your plant. Root rot. So if you plant right at the top of that root ball, or even sometimes slightly higher, like a half inch higher, and then it'll it'll settle right down right at the top of that root ball. You can always put mulch on it. It's not like it's going to be, you can put, a layer of 2-3 inches of mulch, and that's no problem. It's all going to break down, and it's going to be well aerated. But the idea is to keep it from settling down too low. Do you have a question? And then, but here in Arizona, because our really alkaline, rocky soil, the roots have a tendency to want to go wide. It's kind of like a path of least resistance rather than deep. So that's why you want to go as wide as you can go, and we recommend about 3 times the width. Now, in a 5-gallon plant like this one, that's still a pretty good size hole. So, but when you start getting these larger gallon sizes, a big old tree, 3 times the width is going to be some huge hole. So I would say try to go twice the width at least, okay, on a really huge gallon-sized pot. Because if you don't go very wide, chances are that plant's going to be stunted, okay? And then another thing that most of you probably know is that whenever you take your plant out of the root ball, you want to take those roots and tear off the root-bound roots, okay? Because they've been stuck in this pot for a long time, and they're kind of getting the message they can't do anything, so they kind of stop growing at the rate that you want them to grow at. So what you do is you just tear off the bottom. All those roots are kind of swirling around. If they're not real root bound, I would at least, nothing else, take my glove and just kind of rub the bottom of it and let some of the dirt fall out. And I do the same thing on the side. So you're stimulating those roots, and they're getting the message, okay, hey, I can start growing now. So some people even cut off like an inch all the way around. There's different techniques. You can take a knife and score the side of it. There's different ways to do it, but it's all achieving the same idea. You're trying to stimulate the roots. If you don't do that, it's a major mistake, because then your plant's going to be stunted, okay? And here's another really good thing to do. Before you plant your plant and you dig your nice wide hole, just dig a hole about that root depth, fill it up with water, and do a little perk test. Find out how deep that thing's going to go. And find out how well it's going to drain, is what I'm going to say. If that thing hasn't drained in 8 hours, you got a problem. It should be draining. If you have decent drainage, it'll drain within 2 or 3 hours. Sometimes it'll drain right in front of your eyes. But if it's like 8 hours or more and it still hasn't drained, the best thing to do is find another spot, and then sometimes you only go move over 5 or 10 feet, and it's going to be fine. Maybe even less. Or you can maybe take a digging bar and try to bust through it. It might just be a layer of clay that's not even that thick. It might only be 4 or 6 inches thick. Or it could be some kind of a large rock or something. So that's a really smart thing to do. So the more you do up front, at the very beginning, the more patient you are. And let's say you're paying somebody to do this for you. I would watch them like a hawk. Make sure that they're getting a wide hole. If they're not getting a wide hole, you're not getting your money's worth. So it's your job to be out there kind of being the supervisor. Don't just assume they're going to do all this, because maybe they're going to take the easy way out and just do some, they don't want to kill themselves doing this wide hole. Because let's face it, the ground is really hard. Sometimes you got to get a pickaxe, and you got to do it one chunk at a time, or a jackhammer. So anyway, the more you do at the beginning, the better your plant's going to be. So people always ask, how fast is my plant? How fast is this thing going to grow? A lot of times I'll say that's up to you. If you do a good job at the very beginning, go wide, make sure it's going to drain, and then the way you fertilize and the way you water, that's going to have a lot to do with how fast your plant grows. Of course, some things are going to be faster than others anyway. So anyway, we always like to recommend, after you get and our owner here, Ken, always likes to say, if you water your hole first before you plant, that's always a good idea because it's going to minimize stress. Because it acts like a sponge. A lot of times the soil acts like a sponge, and it'll just kind of dry out your plant. Especially, let's say you're going to water several, or if you're going to plant several plants, it might be a while before you get around to actually watering everything. So if you water your holes first, then they're not going to dry out. Okay, and it's always a good idea to water your plant, the plant itself, that root ball. Water that first before you plant it. Okay. Because basically what you're trying to do is minimize stress. Because these things tend to go through a little bit of a transplant shock, because they've been in this little happy home for quite a while, right? And then all of a sudden now you're putting into their new place of residence, and sometimes they're not too happy about it, and they go through a little bit of stress. So that's one reason why after you get your plant planted in, you water it in. There's a couple of different products that we recommend that you use, and one of them is this Root and Grow. It's got triple action. It's got a fertilizer, but more importantly, it's a liquid fertilizer, so it's quick acting. Okay, so it's not going to last long. You could actually apply this 2 or 3, 4 times, 5 times, with maybe a week or 2 in between at the early stages. But I think the best thing, besides the fact that it helps with transplant shock, it's got this rooting hormone, and so if you apply this thing several times, you're going to get your roots off to a really good start. And if you get your roots happy, then your plant's going to start. You're going to start seeing more top growth, because a lot of these trees, especially, they're going to put a lot of their energy into the roots the first 2 years. So you won't see a lot of top growth right off the bat. They're working on their roots. So if you use something that's got a rooting hormone like this one right here, this Root and Grow, it's really easy to use. You just mix 3½ tablespoons with a gallon of water. So after you get your plant planted, you water it in, and then you take some of this all-purpose fertilizer, sprinkle the appropriate amount on, which is not much, right on that root ball. And then you take a gallon can and you just put a very small amount, 3½ tablespoons, pour it right on there. That's a great way to get your plant off to a good start. Okay. This all-purpose fertilizer, 744, we make this ourselves. Ken came up with this formula. And one thing I really like about it, aside from having nitrogen, phosphorus, potassium, it's got sulfur in it. It's got sulfur and iron. The sulfur is a really good thing to use because it helps drop the pH. Our pH is right around, the water is right around 9. And neutral's 7, right? So once you start getting up past 8 or something, that's pretty alkaline. And our soil tends to be somewhere like 8.5, sometimes 9. And then the water that's coming out of the tap is very alkaline as well. And so if you can get the pH lower, the idea is that there's a lot of micronutrients that are right there in the soil, but they can't be used by the plant. They're kind of locked up. As soon as you get the pH down, all of a sudden the plants really perk up. Do you notice, like after it rains, let's say you had a lawn, or you're watering your garden a lot in June, and you're watering like crazy, but the plants just don't look that healthy, right? Especially lawns, I notice. And then as soon as it rains, it looks fantastic, right? Well, it's not just the fact that it's getting all this water, and it's got nitrogen. I used to think that for years. It was mainly the nitrogen, in the rainwater. It's the fact that the pH of the water is so much lower, and all of a sudden all these nutrients are sitting right there that couldn't be used. Then all of a sudden they're being used, and the plant just perks up beautifully. Because I have a lawn. I'm one of those crazy people that has a lawn. Because they take a lot of water around here. And it's amazing. I get a couple of little bitty rainfalls, and they look green. It's just like nature's fertilizer. So anyway, if you were to use soil sulfur in addition to this or on your property, that is a really smart thing to do, because you'll get that pH lower, and most of these plants are not native like the Arizona cypress. Most of these plants are not from around here. So most of these plants are going to want like closer to neutral pH, right? Or some of them even want a little bit slightly acid, like 6.5. So you can see how a 9 pH is really not to their liking, right? So all you do is you give it soil sulfur, you sprinkle it on top, just like you would a regular fertilizer, and all of a sudden your plants, you're going to notice a difference with your plants, okay?
If you have bark mulch and you just sprinkle it on top, it'll filter down either the soil sulfur or the fertilizer.
Oh, if you were to put it on top, let's say,
Yeah.
yeah, you can do that. It'll just kind of filter its way right down. The question was if you have mulch, like bark, cedar bark, can they put the fertilizer on top? And yes, you can. And one of the great things about this is it's a granulars and it's slow release fertilizer, so you only need it it's going to last a long time. It'll last about 3 months. So we recommend you use it 4 times a year, once every season. And it'll break down each time you water. And then we recommend use that soil sulfur about once a year. I didn't bring that bag up here, but anyway, I forgot to do that. It'll break down each time. Go ahead.
Do you use it on your natives that have been in your yard for a long time? Too?
This?
Yeah.
Well, there's different schools of thought on that one, okay? I took a class recently through the Yavapai County Extension in the University of Arizona. Jeff Schlauer teaches that class. He doesn't really highly recommend fertilizing the natives because he says I was asking him about that because I wasn't really sure I bought into that, okay? And I'm not still to this day I'm riding the fence on that one because I think that they can still benefit from fertilizer because the soil is just so devoid of a lot of good nutrients around here. But his thinking was, I asked him about that. He said, well, sometimes you can get a lot more, the nitrogen is going to make a lot more growth, and then the bugs will tend to attack that a little bit more. So, like I said, there's different schools of thought, but especially the plants that are not native, those are the ones you definitely would want to fertilize, okay? Here's another product that we like to recommend. It's called AquaBoost Crystals. These things, you want to get this into the hole down by the root ball, on the bottom of the root ball and to the sides of the root ball. And what it does is it allows you to use way less water. And it also has these mycorrhizal, these beneficial fungi that is going to help the plant in lots of different ways. So we recommend, and then of course mentioned mulch. Right down here is our premium mulch. We definitely recommend that you amend the soil or the hole rather when you plant your plant to mix in somewhere between 1/3 or less, maybe 1/4 of whatever goes back in your hole would be mulch, because that's going to provide better aeration. It's going to loosen things up, and the drainage will be a lot better. Of course, it's going to break down, so that the plant has to get used to the native ground. So that's why you don't want to use too much. Some people get a little bit hog wild and they maybe use 50%. That's probably, I would say that's too much. I'd say use somewhere between 1/3 or 1/4 of what's going back in your hole would be the mulch. You also want to make sure you mix it in well, because roots tend to not like going through different soil mediums, so you wouldn't want to like layer it. They want to it should be nice and mixed, and then the roots will flow a little bit more freer, okay? So those are some little thoughts about planting.
When I take all the rocks out of this,
Yeah, I didn't mention that.
There's not much native soil left. There's so many rocks, and then you're left with this little pile. So pretty much need to put in, more. Well,
yeah. Okay, so the comment was there's so many rocks in the soil, by the time you end up taking rocks out, there's not a whole lot of native soil left. I've noticed that problem too. We recommend, taking out rocks about golf ball size or larger out. And if you've got some good-sized rocks in there, all of a sudden you're noticing, hey, there's not a whole lot. So what I've done is I went somewhere else in my yard and got some native soil and brought it in. Because I still want to keep that same ratio. I don't want to get too much mulch, because it's all going to break down. It only takes about a year and it's gone, So if that was the case, I would just go get some soil somewhere else in your yard, just a couple of shovelfuls there would probably do the trick, Somewhere outside, foot in, foot out. You could just dig a little trench. And that might have been what you were kind of suggesting. I don't know. but you could, let's say you have a slight little bit of runoff. You could build a little trench just by digging it with a shovel or a digging bar. You don't have to go very deep. All you're trying to do is keep that water from running off. So you could build maybe like a foot wide, let's say, or maybe, you know, it doesn't really matter. It could be 6 inches, it could be a foot, it could be whatever. But the whole idea is when it rains or when you water, it's gonna go right down there. It's not gonna continue to run off.
So on the upside of the slope.
Yeah. Or either, you know, foot in or foot out of that drip line, you know, just kind of use your own discretion, whatever makes sense to you, you know. But the whole idea is it's going to trap that water and it's going to help it right where those roots are, you know, tend to be growing. It's interesting, like trees, the roots can actually grow, they can actually go like 1.5, 2 times past your canopy, you know. So a lot of times when you're watering an old tree, it's when you're watering other plants, that's where it's getting its water from there as well, you know. The worst time for a plant is when it's windy and when it's cold. Those are the two whenever it's windy, you should be thinking, oh, I need to go out and water. And you want to stay one step ahead of the game. If you can get there, if you're paying attention to the weather reports and they say, and it's springtime, anybody who's lived here for any time at all, you know that it's extremely windy in the spring, okay? So let's say you know it's going to get really windy, that's like a red flag. Okay, I got to go out and water. So if you stay one step ahead of the game, like I said, that's the key. Because all you're trying to do is keep your plant from getting stressed. Because once they get stressed, let's say it's dry and then it's windy all day long. Sometimes it'll last 12 hours, sometimes it'll last 24 hours. It doesn't even have to be a high wind. Any kind of wind, a sustained wind, it's just going to suck all that water right out. And that's what really stresses your plant out, and that's what usually kills it, okay? So if you've already watered it before the wind comes, it's going to take out a lot of that water, but at least it's not going to be stressing your plant out. And then the other red flag would be when it gets really cold in the winter. And we're talking about, I'd say normally, on a normal winter, not like this last winter or the previous winter. Those are two of the warmest winters we've had in years. But a typical winter, you're going to get down to low to mid-20s. Will be your lows. That's pretty typical. And then you got to get a little system comes in. You're going to get down in the teens for a few days, and then maybe it'll warm up again. But you're still going to be well below 32, right? Freezing. And then you can get every once in a while you'll get down to single digits, like 8 degrees. Those teens and those 8 degrees, those single digits, those are the ones you're really guarding against. That's what's really going to hurt a plant. So if you're paying attention to the weather report and they say, hey, we got a major cold system coming through, that should be like, you know, a little light should go off in your brain. I got to go out and water. It's the opposite of what a lot of people think. They think, oh, that's going to hurt it. But a plant needs turner pressure. You know how a plant, when it hasn't been watered, it's just wilted. And then when you water it, all of a sudden, it just swells right up. So all the cells get filled up, and they call it turner pressure. Well, if it's dry and those cells don't have water in them, they're super vulnerable to the cold, okay? Think of the water like antifreeze, you know? If you water your plant and then it gets cold, usually it'll just be fine, okay? But if it's been dry and the water comes and then the cold comes, that's usually what kills it, okay? So those are the two red flags, wind and cold temperature.